a couple things. Of the mushroom coffees, the ones that I like, that taste the best, are the chaga. Have you tried chaga? So chaga is it's a fungal fruiting body. Actually, it's a fungal presence. It's not a mushroom. It grows on the side of birch trees, and it looks like burl. And people always confuse them. They say, I think I found chaga, but if it's not on a birch tree, it probably isn't. So what chaga looks like, it looks like a burl or growth on a birch tree, and the outside will look like burnt charcoal. Like burnt charcoal. And if you scrape that a little bit and you break it and you get inside the meat will be an amber orange color. It's very pretty. This chaga is famous for having anti-cancer properties as a medicinal. And I don't know how many of you remember Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was very popular in the 70s, won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Russian author, wrote about the Gulag Archipelago and about the atrocities in the Soviet system. But one of the stories he tells is that while he was in the Gulag, he got stomach cancer. And there wasn't adequate medical care, but someone introduced him to chaga, and he swears that the chaga tea is what cured him of cancer. We'll never know, but chaga is associated with that. So of the ones I've tried, the best tasting are the chaga-based ones, are delicious. So if you like flavors like those dark, more bitter flavors, if you like coffee, you like cocoa, you like dark chocolate, you'll like chaga because it has that kind of dark flavor to it, and it's really good. Now the second part is medicinals. So here's the thing. I'm active in a couple of clubs, and I meet a lot of mycologists, and I meet scientists who do research. And it's divided. There are researchers who believe, yes, that there are medicinal properties that we can prove, and there are others that know the evidence isn't there yet. So I'm in the middle. I kind of open-minded. I think we should do more research, but I'm not 100% convinced that the efficacy is there necessarily. So I'm like attentive, watchful, waiting kind of thing to see.
You mentioned chaga.
Yes.
Are they sold commercially?
Yes. So chaga, yes, there are a number of companies that sell chaga. The most famous is Fungi Perfecti out in the West Coast, and you see their ads everywhere. They sell chaga-based stuff. The thing is, what I find difficult about mushroom tinctures is I don't know who made them. Do you know what I'm getting at? So I'm not sure, like, what's the quality of the product? I mean, are they good mushroom hunters? It disturbs me that you can get something that says lion's mane, lion's mane, lion's mane, they all taste different. You know what I'm saying?
Who made them? I mean, they made themselves.
Well, but here's what who harvested? Was the person who harvested them knowledgeable enough to distinguish the real thing from the false thing? Secondly, are they sophisticated enough to prepare it correctly? For instance, with chaga, what I've heard is that you got to take it from a live tree. You don't want it off dead stuff, or else it's less effective. So I'm wondering if the person harvesting the chaga, did they practice best practices of harvesting for the maximum potency of the mushroom? Don't know. But I will say of the medicinals, the most famous chaga, lion's mane, and I'll have a picture of it shortly, which is also delicious. Even if you don't, it doesn't matter. They taste great. Hen of the woods, maitake, is a popular medicinal. We definitely get that in New England in the fall. Turkey tail, we obviously get tons of here in Massachusetts. Trying to think the other big medicinals. I know I'm missing some famous ones, but those are the ones that are top of mind right now.
In addition to being a Mass Audubon certified field naturalist, Jonathan currently serves as vice president of the oldest mushroom club in North America, the Boston Mycological Club, and is a board member of the Pioneer Valley Mycological Association. Jonathan, as you may have heard a short while ago, lives in Ayr, in what used to be a funeral home, and he's also chair of the planning board. Today, Jonathan will reveal what mushrooms are and how they live. He will review the most common and most spectacular mushrooms in our region. He will identify the most delicious mushrooms to eat. And finally, he will teach us the basics of safe mushroom foraging. His goal today is to stimulate your curiosity and to encourage you to get up into those woods of ours and make your own extraordinary discoveries. I'm going to wrap up with a quote from Jonathan. Jonathan says, when mushrooms emerge, they can delight us with beautiful colors, strange shapes, and curious aromas. They can also enlighten, sicken, or even kill. Thank you, Jonathan, for that delightful quote.
There you go.
Thank you all. Enjoy.
Thank you. Well, that's it. We're done. We're good. Well, thank you very much. So I'll say a little bit about what this is and what this is not. So what this is not is Mycology 101. So this is not college level course. And there's a lot of stuff I have to leave out in an hour and a half. So I'm not going to talk about yeasts or plant pathogens or ascomycetes. There's a whole world that I can't get into. However, what this is kind of an introduction and an inspiration. If this program is successful, hopefully you'll be motivated to go out there on your own and discover what you can discover. And so the thrust of the program is to help you discover. So we'll talk about what mushrooms are, how they live, what they look like, how to distinguish one from another, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you can eat and what you must certainly avoid. A couple of comments right away. No bait and switch this evening. Oh, by the way, there are seats up here if you're looking for chairs. We got room. Okay. No bait and switch. So all the mushrooms I talk about, you can find in New England or in Massachusetts, and most of them are really common. So I'm not going to tantalize you with beautiful mushrooms that you'll never see. That isn't going to happen. The second thing that's important to know is that while there are deadly toxic mushrooms out there, every mushroom, including the most dangerous toxins, is safe to handle, to touch. You cannot get poisoned by touching or handling a mushroom. You will not get dermatitis. And the reason is because their molecules are too big to pass through osmosis through our skin. In fact, you can even taste mushrooms, and mycologists do this to get a sense of flavors and distinguish one flavor or one mushroom from another. You can taste and spit out because, again, the molecules, the toxic molecules, are too big to pass through your tongue or your cheek tissue and inside. You have to eat it in order to be poisoned. So with that happy news established, I like to begin all interesting and important things in the dark. So let's start with some mysteries. And if you know the answers to these, I'm going to ask you to just keep it to yourself so everyone else can have some fun. So the first one is this. I'm on a walk, leading a walk in September, Harvard, Petersham, Harvard Forest. And I can't see this other person participating on the opposite side of a berm on this road. I can't see them. And they shout out, "Hey, I've just found a chanterelle on this log over here." How did I know without seeing him or the mushroom that he was wrong, that he had not found a chanterelle and had found something else instead? Second mystery. Look at these two little brown mushrooms growing on wood. One of them is a delicious edible. The other is one of the two most poisonous mushrooms that are commonly found in Massachusetts. Which is which? Finally, third mystery. What the heck is that? Some of you have seen this. Some of you know what it is, but you may have seen it, walk by it, and wondered, is that a plant? Is it fungal? What is it? We'll find out. So what the heck is a mushroom? Well, for most of us, this is what a mushroom is. It comes in a package in the grocery store, and it has a cap, and if we flip the cap over, in the center, there'll be a stem you see here. And as a matter of fact, cap and stem is a popular form of mushroom. Here's another one. I put this here because some of you may have found it yourselves. That's the flower pot mushroom, the Leucocoprinus birnbaumii. Have any of you seen that? Yes, I see a couple nodding heads. You've seen it. Yes, it's a little yellow, pretty yellow mushroom, cap and stem. But they can have many shapes. So I'm going to pass this around so we could talk about the parts of the cap and stem mushrooms. And in fact, we got a bunch of them. So we got this on this line here. You look like you'd like a mushroom. I can tell from your expression. All right. And we're going to share. So if you don't get one, don't feel like, oh my God, I didn't get you. You will. You will. You will. All right. So now that we got the mushrooms, we can talk a little terminology. So, cap and stem. There you go. Who's got it? So typical. Here's the cap. You flip it over, and that's what we call the hymenal surface. That's the fertile surface. In this case, we see gills. This, of course, is called the stem, and this is the base. And glory hallelujah, this one's even got fungal tissue, I'm going to talk about in a second, growing from the base. That's the mycelium of the fungus growing from that. So I'm going to pass this around. just to get you started on what that can be. But notice that that's just one possibility for a mushroom shape. Some other populars, shapes could be, you could be floral in shape with thin tissue like this black trumpet. And the reason you're seeing this color is that's the sunshine coming through. That skin is so translucent, the tissue, that you can see that color. Shelf mushrooms are a popular shape. This is a Ganoderma tsugae, the reishi mushroom beginning to come out of hemlock bark. Anyone recognize this guy here? Somebody must. Usually someone gets this. Chicken of the woods grows shelf-like. So you can have shelves up and down a tree, but you can also have shelf-like mushrooms growing at the base of trees. This is the Barndozoii berkeleyi, and I put this here because this is the one people ask about. What's that giant white mushroom growing at the base of the tree in my yard? Well, chances are it's this bad boy here, known as a polypore. You can have a coral-like shape, like this coral mushroom, and if you flip that one upside down, it could be said to have a shape, icicle-like shape. And does anyone recognize this? We just talked about it 5 minutes ago. Lion's mane, the Hericium, that's the lion's mane that we talked about. That's known for its deliciousness and possible medicinal qualities. And of course, mushrooms can be mischievous, as you see here with this stinkhorn. Anyone get stinkhorns yet in their garden this year? Well, if you lay down some mulch or wood chips, you're likely to see these. But the thing to know is that the mushroom you see is merely the fruiting body. It exists to do one thing, to reproduce, to send out spores. Spores you can think of as minute, tiny seeds. So what a mushroom fungus does to reproduce is it creates the fruiting body, the mushroom, and then it sends out spores out into the world, and hopefully the spore lands on an appropriate surface with the food source, and it sends out a tiny thread called a hyphae. Hyphae is just one cell width wide. A cell width for a fungal cell is like 4 to 6 microns. You know what that means? 4 to 6 millionths of a meter. So hyphae is typically invisible unless it bundles together. Ta-da! How many of you have seen this rolled logs in the woods and seen that white thready stuff? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding of heads. Well, that white thready stuff is the true body of the mushroom. It's called mycelium, and it's that clustered hyphae that we just talked about. There's going to be some here. I'm going to pass this around so you can see. And there's going to be some here. I'm going to give this to you. And just pass this back and pass this forward. All this can do this together. I want to show you how to use this because it's not always that obvious, as I can see. So I want to ask everyone, does this work? No. Does this work? No. It's like a sandwich. This is a slice of bread, your eyeball's the other slice of bread, and this is your peanut butter and jelly. It's got to go right in the middle. It's all got to go close together. Oh, there it goes, and then it comes into focus. When you're using these, just be aware that the smaller one has the higher magnification, but you're going to have to bring it up closer, and when you do, you're going to see stuff. So I'm passing some stuff around so you can see what mycelium looks like. The mycelium is what does the living and the dying, the eating, the digesting, the making of waste, etc. Now, oddly enough, animals are more closely related to fungi than fungi are related to plants. Years ago, fungi were considered plants, and it makes sense. They kind of stay in the ground, they don't move around. That makes a plant, right? But they've determined, no, fungi are entirely different. They have a different cell wall structure, made of a different material, chitin rather than cellulose, and more importantly, have a different lifestyle. You can think of fungus as inside-out animals. Now, plants photosynthesize, so they make their own food from light. They get the light, and with chlorophyll, they turn water and carbon dioxide into sugars, and then they can turn these sugars into more complex chemicals that give you wood. They can make cellulose, they can make lignin, etc. Now, fungi like us can't make its own food, so we have to eat something. But animals ingest, right? I'm going to pass it around to the back here. And then you can pass that, if you would, after you take a look. Fungi go out into their food. So animals, we eat, we take it, chew, bring it into our stomach, release enzymes and acids, break it down, goes into our intestines, and then we reabsorb. We absorb the nutrients that we want. Fungus penetrates its food source, releases enzymes outside of itself, and then absorbs from the outside the nutrients that it wants. Now, this gets pretty freaky because, as you can imagine, in a certain sense, you have a trouble distinguishing, well, where's the fungus begin and where does it end? What's outside and inside if it's permeating all the way through it? But the important thing to understand is that that white stuff is doing the living and the dying. The mushroom that you see at the top is merely doing the reproduction, if that could be described as merely. Okay, so the part that releases the spores is known as the fertile surface, or technically the hymenium. And for most of us, that's this here. You flip it over, and just as the mushrooms that I've been passing around, you see those gills. That's the most common structure. So on those gills are microscopic structures that have produced spores, and the spores drop, and the reproductive cycle goes on. But that's just one possibility. Let's look at the most primitive possibility you can see on a black trumpet, where just that outside grayish surface, that's the fertile surface. It's just that smooth surface, and they produce structures and send spores out there. Another possibility is that instead of having gills, you can have tubes and pores. Tubes and pores. If it's a cap and stem mushroom and it's soft, and you can give it a little squeeze, and it has tubes and pores, it's a boletes. If, however, it's got tubes and pores and it's hard and tough, it's probably a polypore. So I'm going to pass these around. I'm going to go someone who hasn't gone first. I'm going to start from the back. Sir, so what you can see here, we're going to pass a polypore, which is tube and pore structure. And with the magnifying glass, you can see the pores, and I promise you they're going to be interesting. They have an interesting pattern. And then on the side, you can see the tubes. I'm going to start with you, sir, over here. And then I'll start with you, sir, over here. So you can see pores on this side, and you can actually get a little look at the tubes over here. Anyone recognize this? Go ahead. It isn't, but it's got color and some of the body of a bolete, so I can understand why you came at that. That is teeth, the tooth. I never know what it's toothed. It has teeth, and so the spores are going to come out from the teeth. That's the hedgehog mushroom. It's a popular edible that comes out late summer, early spring. It's got a kind of peachy or white person Band-Aid kind of color on the top, and often very robust and absolutely delicious. One of my favorites. So you can have teeth as a fertile surface. Now check this out. You may decide, as a lineage of mushrooms or fungi, you know what? It's too dangerous sending the spores above ground because there's the risk of dehydration. When mushrooms dehydrate, they get dry and crumbly, and you've seen this in the woods, they no longer produce spores, so their function has been compromised. Well, what can you do to resist dehydration? Well, some lineages have said, well, let's go underground. Therefore, you can arrive at a truffle. Question: do we have truffles in New England? Yes. Anyone want to vote no? Any no votes? Some no votes? Some yay votes? Yays? Ayes? Yes? So here's the thing. You're both right. Because we do find truffles in New England. We absolutely do. But we don't find the good ones, the ones that taste good. We don't get the white and black ones that you read about, in Italy and France. So don't get yourself a little pig. Don't bother. So we get we call them deer truffles, what have you. So they'll be in that weird zone between the needles and the leaf litter, the duff layer, and the actual soil, that humus layer. So that's about 4 to 6 inches down. That's where they'll reside. Now, what is most notable about truffles?
Smell.
Exactly. The aroma. It's a pheromone that's intended to attract mammals and other animals. And that pheromone has a 2-word message, which is, eat me. That's what that is. So they send that signal out, and the animals come and eat the truffles. Now, you probably will not be surprised to learn that of all the spore membranes out there, that the toughest, thickest membranes are on the spores of truffles. Well, why? Because that truffle, that poor spore has to endure a magic journey through an animal's intestinal tract. And then imagine its birthday. Happy birthday! In a pile of poop. Which wouldn't be that exciting for us, but for that fungus, it's a good deal because at least it's born in a food source, right? Okay. Yeah. So they'll be born. So that's how they reproduce. Now check this out. If a lineage of mushrooms decides to go underground and do this truffle lifestyle, it's called hypogeous. this truffle lifestyle. It will never evolve again to release spores out in the open. That hasn't happened yet. However, some lineages have become stinkhorns. Now, I have 2 stinkhorns here. Which one do you think is the young one and which is the older one? Any guesses? The white one is the young one. Anyone have another guess? There are only 2 choices here, so your odds are pretty darn good. Yes, sir?
I think the darker one with the slimy top is the young one.
Oh, interesting. Well, as it turns out, the gentleman in the blue shirt is correct this time. What's happening here? That olive green grayish mass, it's sticky, it's called gleba, and it is the spores. And it also has a scent, but it's not a pleasant scent. It smells like rotting meat. And it's there to attract flies. So the flies come, and the gleba, which is the spore mass, sticks all over the flies, and then the flies fly around, and the spores go all over the place. What you're seeing here on the left is the flies have come and completely cleaned it out. You can actually see this happen. I've seen this. If you have the good fortune, so to speak, to find one of these in your mulch pile, watch. You can actually see the flies come and land and take the gleba away. It can happen in a matter, this could have happened in a matter of hours. Hours. Habitat is, of course, the environment in which the fungus lives, and substrate is what it lives in, what it feeds upon. So we've already talked about poop, so we have some growing on poop here. Lawns, what we call terrestrial mushrooms that grow on grass or lawns. Notice we have a couple things here. Anyone recognize this mushroom over here? These are inky caps, and I think of them as the Mr. Phelps of the mushroom world because they self-destruct. And what you're seeing here is the younger ones are the longer ones, the older ones are the tiny ones. So it's dissolving from the bottom up, releasing a black ink, and in that black ink are the spores. The other lawn you see here is a demonstration of a phenomenon where sometimes mushrooms will form rings or arcs. Have any of you seen that? Yeah, you can see that. So what I imagine is happening is, remember that initial hyphae landed in that lawn, and there's some food there in that soil. And all things being equal, the new mycelium is going to spread out in 360 degrees in the broad circle. So that's how you get the circle. It's going out all directions looking for food, and if it's all equal, it's going out equally. We don't know what the trigger is when mycelium says it's time to send up a fruiting body. We don't know what it is. Is it seasonality, days getting shorter, lack of moisture? What is the trigger? We're not sure, but they send the mushrooms up. If you were to return the next year, there's a good chance that that arc or ring would be there again, but further out, because it's expanded into new food sources, so it's going to be a little bit broader.
Does it die in the center?
You can often see a zone of death just on the inner ring. The center returns back to life, and then it can be a little dull here, and then greenest over here where it's actually contributing to returning nutrients back to the soil. So you can see gradations of neutral, harm, and help. It's kind of weird. Moss is another powerful substrate. Moss is a bryophyte. Bryophytes are plants that do not have vascular tissue to move fluids around. That means all their tissue has to have equal access to moisture, so they're really good at holding water, so that's a good place for mushrooms to be. You can be a mushroom growing on another mushroom. There is a black mushroom that's decaying that these other mushrooms are growing upon. And of course, thank you so much, sir. You can see a log here, decaying matter in the woods, and another substrate on which you can find mushrooms. Are there any mushrooms in this photograph here? There's one, there's one, there's one. They're black trumpets. And I put the slide here on purpose. Black trumpets are wonderful for beginners in the sense that you can't confuse that mushroom for anything else. There's nothing else that looks like a black trumpet but a black trumpet. The hard part with them is not identification, it's seeing them. They look like black leaves. Or if you've ever been on a trail and there's been a mountain biker ahead of you and you notice how the wheels kind of churn up the dirt, it's a little darker where the tread has been because it's turned it up, that's what a string of these looks like. It looks like just exposed earth. I've walked by them, much to my frustration, because there'll be some person behind me who found what I walked by, right? So that has, but this is a lesson in looking very carefully. Another hint. You'll look, you don't find it. Finally, you see a mushroom, right? When you find one, if you're capable of this, I'm 62 in a few weeks, and I'm less and less capable of this. Get down low and start looking around. Odds are you find one, all of a sudden you're going to see others. And I've had the embarrassing situation where I realized there are dozens of mushrooms around me I hadn't seen. But once I relax and I have the impression of one image, I can see the others. And I swear this is true. You're going to think I'm crazy, but try this next time in your woods. You're going to see that this works. This is the most important slide of the program. Lifestyles. Notice that I have spared you domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And it's not because I have anything against Carl Linnaeus or Latin binomials. It's this issue. Knowing that organization, that classification, doesn't help you understand what's happening in the woods. It helps you communicate to other people about specific mushrooms, but knowing that it's in such and such a family or class doesn't necessarily say, well, what is Joe Mushroom doing out here? What's happening? But if you think of the mushrooms and categorize them by lifestyle, which is how do they eat? How do they survive? Lifestyle. Then you have some insight into the ecology of fungus and how it's working in an environment. So the first one I want to talk about is parasitism. So parasitism is a relationship where one party benefits and the other party not only doesn't benefit, but is actively harmed. So in this case here, we have the honey mushroom encircling probably an oak tree, almost always hardwoods. And they almost always appear in these giant clusters. There are multiple species that are called honeys. There's multiple. The most common here is the Malia. They all do damage. I think they're all edible. People throw away the stems, eat the caps. Many people parboil them first. It removes a little bit of a remaining toxicity in them. And what they're doing is they're creating a rot called butt rot between the trunk and the roots. So inevitably, you know what the harm is going to be for this tree. A good wind gust is going to come, and that tree is going to be a deadfall, and down it goes. So parasitism. The fungus benefits, the tree does not, whatever its host is does not. Often those polypores, those shelf mushrooms you see on the side of trees, are often mild parasites. And so do not panic if you have one on a tree in your yard, your lawn. Chances are that tree will live for decades further. Most of the fungal parasites are mild. This is a particularly virulent one. Decomposition. So another thing that mushrooms can do instead is break down dead plant tissue, particularly dead tree tissue. Now, reflect on this. You go out in the woods, how is it that you're able to walk around? Why aren't there just piles of trees and limbs? What happens to them? Well, primarily what happens to them is fungus happens to them. Fungus will be on the front line of decomposition. Obviously, there are other players. Insects, ants, worms, nematodes, bacteria, etc. But fungus is the front line because fungus has evolved the amazing capacity to break down tough polysaccharides like cellulose, like lignin. So cellulose is what makes the cell walls of plants. Lignin is that dark brown stuff. You've seen cubes of it on a really, really, really dead decomposed wood in the forest. You see those cubes of brown stuff. That's the lignin. It gives the tree the strength to stand up. The problem is that stuff is too powerful for anything other than fungi to digest. Now you think about, look at cows that eat grass. What do they have to do to eat the grass? They have to have multiple stomachs, excuse my spit, multiple stomachs, and each stomach is a biome for different bacteria or archaea to break down this material for them because animals can't do that themselves. What I want to propose to you about decomposition is this. When we're in school, we learn about photosynthesis. That's only half the picture. Yes, it's wonderful. Plants can take light, water, and carbon dioxide and make stuff, make sugars, make more complex sugars. But if there wasn't a process to undo it, life wouldn't continue to exist. Everything would have been absorbed years ago. That's why I think of it as a yin-yang. This is the yin or the yang to the other yin-yang. This is the opposite that undoes it, so it's a constant cycle. By them breaking down those complex chemicals, all those nutrients are available to go back into the plants. We're talking potassium, nitrogen, calcium, etc., 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 all those chemicals that they need. So fungus does this great favor to us by encouraging the recycling of material in our forests or any of our terrestrial landscapes. This one in particular is called Xeromphalina campanella, and I love this little composer because they will swamp a stump or a log, and they'll be all over, and they're very, very picturesque, but there's tons of decomposers out there. The biggie. If you've been paying attention to the news or the media for the last 5, 6, 7 years, you've heard about the wood wide web, about things in the forest communicating to each other via the mycelium. Well, what they're referring to is the foundation of ectomycorrhizal symbiosis. So let me break this down. This is a mutually beneficial symbiosis in which both parties win. Both parties win. So the ecto part means wrapped around. Myco means fungus. Rhizal means root. So what's going on here? These are chanterelle mushrooms, and they're sending their hyphae through the soil, descending to the rootlets of their tree host. They're wrapping their hyphae around those rootlets, and there they're engaging in an exchange. The fungus brings water and nutrients to the tree or plant, and the tree or plant is bringing glucose, sugar, to the fungus to live on. This relationship is so important that foresters suspect that as much as 90% of our trees have a relationship, a symbiotic relationship with fungi to live. 80% of terrestrial plants have this relationship. This relationship is so important, some trees give up as much as 40% of their sugar to fungus. That tells you how important it is. Now, think about this. You may have noticed that oak trees can survive where other trees can't. Have you seen that? Like if you notice, if you go to Mount Wachusett, for example, north side, hemlocks, south side, where it's hot and dry, oak trees. Now, it's not, my theory is I don't think oaks love to be in hot, dry, thin-soiled places. What they love is the lack of competition. They can survive where other trees can't. Hot, thin, dry soil. How do they do it? My suspicion is it's through their mycorrhizal relationships, their fungal relationships. Oak trees have more mycorrhizal symbiotic relationships than any other kind of tree. And guess what? How long do they live? Red oaks, up to 150 more. White oaks, 400 years or more. So there's something important about this relationship. I have a question for you. Of the cultivated mushrooms, the ones that are cultivated by people, farmed, and then appear in our stores, which of these categories do you think most of those come from? Parasites, decomposers, or the symbiotic mushrooms? Decomposers. That is the excellent answer. It is the decomposers. These guys you can't raise. You have to grow their hosts, and then somehow, by magic, you'd have to prevent any competition from getting to that host so that your fungus could grow. So in real life, the way you cultivate is you focus on the decomposers. So like oyster mushrooms, the button mushrooms. All right. The white button mushroom, the crimini mushroom, the portobello mushroom. They're all the same mushroom, the same species, Agaricus bisperus. And they're just at different stages. But those, they grow. So what they do is they take a substrate, and that substrate could have been manure, straw, wood chips. They sterilize it to kill the competition, and then they inoculate it with the spores of what they want, and then they grow in a controlled environment of temperature and humidity. This guy, how many of you knew, guys, some of you know what this is. And what is it, ma'am? What is it? Do you know, so let's start from the basics. Is it a plant or a fungus? Let's start even simpler. Have you seen this before?
Yes.
How many people have seen this in the woods? You've seen this, right?
Isn't that a plant that doesn't have any chlorophyll?
Correct. It is a plant without chlorophyll. That's exactly what it is. It is a plant without chlorophyll, and you're right. Its lifestyle is, it is a parasite. What it's doing is it's intercepting the mycelial network between a host tree and its associated fungus, almost always Russula mushrooms, and it's just stealing sugar. It's going on. There you go. You win a sticker. That was so good. Yay! So that's the Monotropa uniflora, a plant that steals sugars from mycelial networks. All right. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to do a kind of parade of some of the most common taxa of mushrooms that we have in the area. Oh, it is not comprehensive. I've left out 99% of what's out there. What this is a kind of, well, you can think of it as a tease or a temptation or preview, just to demonstrate the variety of colors, textures, and forms that mushrooms can take, and some of the more common stuff that you're likely to see. So I want to start with some of the what I call the bathing beauties. Among the most graceful and elegant mushrooms out there are a group called the Amanitas. Now, if you're into plants, you know there are people really into orchids, like a subset of maniacs, the orchid maniacs, right? People recognize what I'm talking about? Well, in mushrooms and mycology, we have similar maniacs, and they tend to be focused on these, the Amanitas. I think it's because of these two qualities. One, they have some of the most beautiful of our mushrooms, graceful mushrooms, are Amanitas. But they're also femme fatales. Some of the deadliest mushrooms in the world are Amanitas. And, oh yeah, and look at this guy. Look how smug this guy is. And he's smug because he's thinking, yeah, mess with me. F-O-F-A. And there, I want to assure you that in real life, this mushroom is pure white. That yellowishness you see there is an artifact of the camera. Oh, I'm sorry, let me get it away. Is an artifact of the camera. And it's in a group called the Destroying Angel group. There are multiple species. The Amanita bisporigera is one. The Amanita verosa. There's a couple of them. But they all do this. They all look very similar, and they all do the same thing. They're perfectly white. White cap, white stem, white base. They look beautiful. People think, you know what I know? I know that the poisonous ones tend to be brightly colored. So I think if it's white, it's going to be safe because the ones in the grocery store are white. Bad thinking. Here's what happens. So it has a toxin called amatoxin. Eat it. 2 to 4 hours later, you're sluicing both ends, horrible stomach sickness, horrible, horrible. Then you start to get, hey, don't steal my show. There you go. You start to feel bad. And then what happens 12 to 24 hours later? What happens? Nothing happens. You're dead. Okay, here's what happens. So the amatoxins, what they do is they inhibit the ability of RNA to replicate proteins. Therefore, those organs that are most dependent on protein refresh, liver, kidneys, they go first. That's why you hear about liver transplants, right, with these. If you're lucky, the liver transplant will work. I think roughly half the time it doesn't. So that means two things. Did that happen in Worcester? Okay. A quick thing. So I've worked with people who are the professionals assigned to the Poison Control Center, the experts in mushrooms. So you call the Poison Control Center, and what they'll do is they'll talk to one of the 2 people in the state that's assigned on duty to be the mushroom expert. Right? So I met one of these people who does that, and he says there are 2 kinds of people most likely to get poisoned. First one, toddlers. And that makes sense. They're out in the yard. Fortunately, most lawn mushrooms aren't toxic. So that isn't too bad. The second group that are most likely to get called in are, yes, immigrants, people from other countries, particularly Asia, Southern Europe, wherever, etc. They come, they see a mushroom that looks like a mushroom they ate safely at home or where they came from. But in their new home, that look-alike mushroom may not be the same as what they knew back home. It may not be the same, and that's where you get big-time trouble. I want you to take a look at some of the characteristics of the Amanita. Notice all this floccular tissue at the top. Some of it is hanging from the margins called appendiculate. Some of it's clustered around the base. There's some loose tissue here. Notice it's kind of club base with this loose sac called a vulva, V-O-L-V-A, of tissue. Yes, that's one right there. You got one. You could pass it if you feel free. Just return the phone to her if you would, so kindly. All right, so you see all this tissue? I want to talk about where does all this tissue come from. So I'm hoping those of you in the back can see this. May have to get up on top of, no, you can see this. Okay, I'm going to be a baby Amanita. Little Amanitas look like eggs. And there is a shell, but think of it as a soft shell of tissue. It's not a hard shell made of calcium. So this is me, and if you actually cut one of these eggs, I swear you can actually see this. You're going to see a silhouette of the mushroom hidden inside of it. So pretend my legs are going to be the stem. Pretend my head's cut off, and just the top shoulders will be the cap. And this will be the cap. It's folded yet, right? So I'm this little baby, I'm hanging out. So as I grow, what's happening? As I'm growing, I'm breaking through that veil, breaking. I'm also opening up my cap because what I want, my goal is to be as open as possible to get most spore dispersal that I can. Meantime, all that tissue breaks apart. Where does it go? So the tissue at the top becomes these warts, you can see here. Tissue at the edges is actually part of this partial veil. You see this here, this little tissue hanging out? That one stretched to the margin. And it was there to protect the gills until the spores are mature enough to reproduce. Then as the cap opened, it fell away. So you get a little skirt. That's called a partial veil. Other parts of the universal veil, the big shell, are here, this loose tissue here. On this one, the Amanita muscaria, it appears as 3 cogged or toothed rings around the base. And this is a more radicating, different base. All 3 of these have different bases. This is longer and radicating. So the classic Mario mushroom. Can everyone see this? I hope so. For those of you, yep, okay, this one, all right. So if you were to ask a child to draw a mushroom, they're going to draw a cap and stem red with white polka dots, right? So what that is this mushroom, the Amanita muscaria. It's one of the most common mushrooms in the world. We don't get the red ones. Ours are yellow to orange. They're red in the Pacific Northwest. They're red in the rest of the world. It's also toxic, but it won't kill you. It has muscarine. Muscarine will give you a rough night of diarrhea, sweats, fever, headache. Very unpleasant, but you'll live.
Unless you decarboxylate it.
Well, if you have that technology, and apparently some shamans must, because it is used in certain cultures for ritual healing, et cetera, et cetera.
It's really just a GABA agonist.
That's beyond me. Are you a chemist? Or?
No, just busy mind.
Well, the thing here, I would say, that's what people, and some people experiment this as a potential psychedelic. I don't recommend it. I think there are better things to try than that. And why risk the muscarine poisoning? But I want to get at is so what those white polka dots are really just the remnants of the universal veil tissue. And it's not part of the cap. You can rub it off. It can wash off in the rain. And you see it here. You see it here. So we have the deadly angel here. We have the famous Amanita muscaria. This is our version of it. I put keys on top to give you a sense of how big these can grow. And sometimes these form fairy rings, too. It makes a great picture. Beautiful picture. This I just chose because it's pretty. Long stem, long radicating root. I just love all this floccular tissue on the top. Boletes. Remember I talked about the tube and the pore mushrooms? Well, the ones that are soft and squishy and cap and stem are called boletes. And the boletes are an important one because there's so many delicious edibles in the boletes, including the king, the porcini, the Boletus edulis. And I got good news. Yes, we do get porcini edulis in Massachusetts, and we get even more if you take a trip into Maine, because they're particularly fond of spruce and fir trees as well.
Slugs get them.
But the slugs often get them. So what I have here is these are by no means all the boletes. There are dozens of different boletes in our woods. Many of them have ordinary colors. I picked I picked one boring one and then 3 exceptional ones just to give you a sense of the range. So yes, they could be boring like any other kind of mushroom. But check out this old man in the woods has got this flocculose black hairs in tufts at the top and on the stipe. And if I were to have a live version of this for you and cut it, you'd see a gray flesh that upon exposure to oxygen will turn pink, then red, then black. Some boletes will have a yellow flesh and you cut them, and they turn blue. Some turn blue slowly. Others, it's so fast, I have to tell people, watch carefully, because as soon as I cut it, it's going to go flash blue. It's incredible. And it's a lot of fun to play with those colors. Speaking of color, the brilliant red, ruby red one is the Exudoporus frostii. Brilliant red cap. When it's fresh, it's kind of wet and viscid on the top, lighter margin. And then it's got this extraordinary stipe. That texture you see is called reticulation. That's where you can actually feel the lines like a netting around it. You can actually touch and feel, 3-dimensional. It'll either be ruby red like the cap or brilliant yellow. Gosh, it's beautiful. Another one I like that's yellow is the Pulveroboletus vanillii. And as it ages, it develops pink tones in the cap. I also picked this mushroom because not only is it this yellow really pretty, but that's another partial veil. This partial veil is still attached to the margin of the cap and here at the stem. Eventually, it'll fall off. Notice with the Amanita, it was much more robust, like a textile, like cloth. This is much more friable and delicate. We're going to see that different partial veils will have different qualities. And the reason I hammer on this is that if you're interested in identifying the mushrooms that you find, that's one of the characteristics you look at. So with the Amanitas, I spent time showing you each of those Amanitas had a different base. That's a characteristic. The quality of the Hymenium, is it pores or tubes, or is it gills, or is it some teeth? All these things are clues, but among the clues may be does it have a partial veil, and what kind of partial veil may it have? What's its quality? Russulas are among the most common mushrooms we have, and they're also classic. This is almost purely circular cap, and then the stipe is what we call even, just straight up and down, doesn't bulb out, just straight up and down. And we'll see them from the beginning of the season through September, October. Typical colors are white, red, greens, some yellow browns, and my favorite is called the variata because it can go from brown and olive colors to these beautiful pink, lilac, and violet tones. Gorgeous mushroom. Often, look at the caps. They got spots like stars. The colors and the spotting echo, they look like nebulas, like star nebulas, and they're just really beautiful to find. The white ones you see can be very large and often painfully bitter. If you taste it, you're like, wow, incredibly acrid. Fun to do when there's children around because they love seeing the expression on your face when you taste it. The green ones tend to be the collectible edibles. They're not the kind of mushroom where you slice and saute in butter. These mushrooms, what people do is they take the caps and they brine them or pickle them. And then it's very popular in Slavic and Russian cultures. They pickle and brine these and eat them as snacks with black bread and vodka. The red ones I don't recommend picking for food because some of them are toxic, like this one called the Russula emetica. As the name suggests, emetica, you're going to open up. You don't want that. So they're hard to distinguish in the field. You need a microscope or a DNA analysis to tell some of these red Russulas apart, which is why I don't recommend them for eating. I just recommend it for admiring. You know, oh, look, there's a pretty Russula. Among the Russulas, closely related within the family Russulas, are these. Lactarius, lactate, lactation, releasing of milk. Lactarius are a group of Russula mushrooms that, when cut, release a liquid called latex or milk. We're not sure why. Maybe it's a defense against insects, we're not sure. If you look at this mushroom here, the Lactifluus velimus, this is the same mushroom, and if you look carefully, you can see I broke the gills here with a knife blade, and you can just begin to see some droplets form. That's the latex. Look what happened 30 seconds later. This particular latex on this species stains the gills a deep brown where it touches. So latex is weird. It can be white, it can be clear, it can be both, cold way, yellow, green, orange, red, blue. Further, it can start one color, it could start clear and turn white, it could start white and turn clear, it could start white and turn yellow, it could start yellow and turn green. So they can change. Further, it could stay the same color but then stain the tissues colors. You see the brown here. Look here. This is called the ligniotis, Lactarius ligniotis. It's got this velvet chocolatey brown cap and the stem. When you cut it, it gives a white latex, but it stains the gills pink. In real life, it's much pinker than it shows on the screen where it's brownish. I swear it's truly a pink and it's wild. These two mushrooms are both edibles, and I want to talk a little bit about them because a lot of people don't know about them, and they walk right by them. They're very common, so you'll often see them. Two, they're absolutely delicious, and they're the only mushroom I know that gets crispy in the pan. Mushrooms rarely get crispy. Oh, yeah, they get crispy. I've seen some, yeah, that sounds good, right? Yes, it is good. And what's the third thing about it? Oh, remember someone saying about the boletes? You find one, you get excited, maybe it's an edible, and then it's got larval tunnels. It's no good. The insects that got there before you, these are almost always insect-free. So the ones that are edible, there are three famous ones. The velimus, the hygrophoroides, and the corrugatus are closely related. All produce a latex. This latex here, the velimus, it gets its name because it's voluminous. And when I do this in the field, I demonstrate, and I cut the gills, I kind of do it like this because it's going to drip like rain, like white rain over here. The other thing about it is that it stinks like fish. However, when you cook it, the fishiness goes away. You're not going to smell fish, you're not going to taste it. It's going to be completely clean. So the velimus, the hygrophoroides, and the corrugatus are delicious, in the Lactarius family, delicious edibles. I want to also draw your attention to the gills. If you look at the pattern of gills here, and then over here, you'll notice that with the velimus, the gills are more closely together. You can see that? And then the hygrophoroides, you notice that the gills are a little further apart. So there's, in the guidebooks, you'll see crowded, close, subclose, subdistant, distant. Just like the partial veils, just like the bases, just like the color shapes, forms, just like hymeniums. This is another way of distinguishing one species from another. What's the spacing of the gills? Cortinaries. This is one of the largest families of mushrooms in New England, but also the world, of the cap and stems. Cortinaries are distinguished by two qualities. The first is a spore color, brick red, or as I like to think of it, dried blood red. Beautiful color. The Cortinarius semisanguineus perhaps best illustrates this. Dull mushroom, dull yellow-brown mushroom, the cap and stem. You flip it over and it's got the most gorgeous red color underneath it. Just to demonstrate what happens to mushrooms as they age, just like people, they lose a lot of their color and shape. This is that Cortinarius semisanguineus. You notice, where'd all the beautiful red go? But people collect these and dry them to use as dyeing, D-Y-E, not mushrooms, right? Dyeing, D-Y-E, mushrooms. Just as this is a common dyeing mushroom too, it gives you a red, and you see this even through the winter.
Do you have to soak them in ammonia?
I don't know what you have to soak them in.
Do that with lichens.
There's different things depending on what you're working with. There's different mordants to bind it, etc.
You can eat these?
No. So the Cortinarius, I only know of one species that's edible called the gypsy. Otherwise, Cortinarius are to be avoided. As far as I know, none of them will kill you, but many of them will make you sick. So you avoid the Cortinarius. So one is the color of the spores. What color is it? Brick red or blood red? The second thing is notable is notice the quality of its partial veil. It's got what's called a cortina, or a web-like veil that forms these threads. When this veil collapses, it comes off the margin, it'll often collapse and wrap around the stem. Now, this tissue of the threads is a little sticky. So guess what happens? When the spores descend, they stick, right, to the little threads of the partial veil, which is often on these Cortinarius is what you'll notice when you flip it over. You'll see a wiggly red ring around there. And what that is the collapsed cortina trapping the blood red spores. This mushroom over here is the Cortinarius iodes. It's absolutely gorgeous. You'll see this mid-August through the fall. It's got a purple cap, viscid when young, slippery, slimy, with yellow dots. Flip it over and you can see there's the ring. There's some red spore color in there. You're going to find this summer. I promise. You'll be walking with friends and your friends will say, oh, look at that beautiful purple mushroom. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to look at them and say, oh yes, that's the Cortinarius iodes. And they will be really impressed with you. Now, I want to transition from some general mushroom looks to specific species that we can find this time of year. So let's solve mystery number 2. The one on the left is Flammulina volutipes. That's a prize edible. And the reason I bring this up is it's one of the edibles that actually, now it's June. When I first made this program, it was late winter, early spring. These guys will fruit through the winter. And I've seen them with snow and ice on top of them. It's really weird. In the stores, this is known as enoki, E-N-O-K-I, and they're little white thready mushrooms with little white caps. And sometimes in Asian restaurants, they'll be served in soups. But that's the way they're cultivated. But when they grow wild, they have this orange-brown color, and then the stem has this velvety texture on it, and that's why they get the nickname velvet foot. They're small, they're brown, they grow in wood. Guess what? The Galerina marginata is one of the other of the 2 most deadly poisonous mushrooms that are common here, is this guy. It also has the amatoxin, but it's a little brown mushroom like this, and it grows on wood like this, and sometimes it grows on the same logs. What does that mean? That means for most of us, this is not a mushroom for us to hunt for. Let's not bother, because you don't want to take the chance of this. Now, you may say, the sharp-eyed among you may have noticed that this one has rings. There's a ring here. So there was a partial veil that collapsed and left a ring. We've talked about this with other mushrooms. The problem is, sometimes those rings rub off. Sometimes they wash off. So you can't just go by that. You have to really have a comprehensive understanding of both of these mushrooms before you go diving into these. The first thing you're going to see in the woods practically year-round are these little fan-shaped mushrooms. They're always clustered. You're never going to see 1 or 2. They'll always be wrapped around the trunk, wrapped around a fallen log. And in particular, there are 3 lookalikes. There's the true turkey-tailed Trametes versicolor, the false turkey-tailed Sterlium austria, and then a third one that's also not a true turkey-tailed called the purple tooth, the Trichapton biforme. All of these are small. All of them are fan-shaped. All of them grow on wood. All of them will always be multiple. You're never going to find onesie-twos. There's going to be lots of them. But here's how you're going to tell them apart. Also, all of them are zonate. They have these rings of color on the cap. They have a lateral stem. That means off to the side rather than the center, and they grow out from the side of the wood. Now, here's how to tell them apart. The true turkey-tailed Trametes versicolor will have a very conspicuous pattern of pores or holes on the undersurface. A pattern of pores or holes. True turkey-tail. The false turkey-tail won't have holes, won't have a pattern of holes. It'll just be a solid surface. Hint, as it ages, it gets more of a tan color rather than white. The Trichapton biforme often has a white cap with green in it. The green is algae that found a home. On the undersurface are teeth. When it's young, they're purple, but as it ages, they turn a darker brown. This one is the one that's the true turkey-tail is said to have medicinal properties. I want to tell you a story. Famous mycologist, the late mycologist Gary Linkoff, he's the author of the the National Audubon Guide to Mushrooms in North America. Gary Linkoff, he's the guy. He's also he was president of the New York Club for many decades. He was invited to a conference by executives, pharmaceutical executives, and they asked him, Gary, if you were to pick one mushroom to study for its potential medicinal properties, what one mushroom would you pick? He picked the Trametes versicolor. Trametes versicolor is known is suspected to have powerful tumor-shrinking anti-cancer properties. Right? The pharmaceutical executives are bitterly disappointed. Do you know why?
It's common.
Exactly, because this is one of the most common mushrooms in the entire world. It's found almost on every continent, but Antarctica or something like that. It's incredibly common. So you're going to see a lot of different ones. And when you're done, just pass them forward. And then there's the regular turkey-tail. I didn't get to that. Who has it? Who's got their hands on it? Exactly. And she's got her hands on it. Yes, and if you look carefully, you're going to see gazillions of little holes in it. So that you had the real turkey-tail. Absolutely. Well, I don't eat any of them because none of them, they're not, so just medicinal doesn't mean edible. Medicinal means there's some kind of treatment you have to apply to it. It's like some medicinals you just eat. Eat the lion's mane, eat the chaga. Well, actually, no, that's not true. You eat the lion's mane, you eat the maitake, but you can also, chaga, you can make a tea. With the Trametes versicolor, you can make a tincture. And there's different things about, well, do you suspend it in alcohol, suspend it in water? It depends on the chemistry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole other universe of topicality, where you get into the medicinals. Now, speaking of medicinals, the Iceman, how many of you are familiar with Otzi the Iceman? Yeah, 5,000 years old. Yes, exactly. He was discovered by, I think, a couple of hikers in the Alps in the early 90s, and what an extraordinary discovery. He was beautifully preserved, and on his person, he had a little leather pouch, and in this leather pouch, he had pieces of two mushrooms, the Fomas excavatus and the Fomatopsis betulina. Interestingly, all the way in the Alps, we have these, you've seen these mushrooms in our woods gazillions of times. These are two of the most common mushrooms there. This Fomes, it looks a lot like, it must be floating around out there. It looks like one of the mushrooms I showed you earlier. It's hoof-shaped. It's perennial. This means it can produce new fertile surfaces year after year. The fertile surface, the youngest one, is down here. And it's known as a fire starter mushroom. If you scoop some of the insides out and grind it, it makes a good fire starter. The other thing you can do is you can carry fire in it. You make a hole, you can carry fire. The burning ember, Native Americans would use this, carry fire. So we suspected he used it for fire. The birch polypore has anti-parasitic properties, particularly nematodes and other little parasites like that. And scientists have discovered that poor Otzi was infected with intestinal parasites, so we suspect he was using this as medicine for himself. You've seen this. You'll see it on the sides of birch trees, old dead standing birch snags. And I want you to notice something. You'll find the snag standing up like this, and you can see snags on the ground like this. Now, when you see them like this, and you see this mushroom on there, look at which way the mushroom is turned. These are gravitropic. That is, when they're alive, they turn in such a way to make sure their fertile surface is parallel to the ground. So if you find a log on the ground, and these are on there, if they're vertical like this, it means that they died before the tree died and fell to the ground. But if the tree is this way, right, and the mushroom is turned this way, after the tree fell, the living mushroom turned to face the ground again so that it could release its spores. Who remembers any of the 3 lifestyles that we talked about earlier? Who can say one?
Decomposition.
Decomposition is one. Yay. You get a sticker. Yay. What's another one? Parasitic. And this gentleman gets a sticker. Yay. Yay. Oh, this one even has a snail. What's that? You like a sticker. Excellent. What's the third one? Ectomycorrhizal. We were close enough. I know what you meant to say. But as long as you remember that it's mutually symbiotic, that's the important. Even if you forget the complex, congratulations. You forget the complexities, right? So there's another thing you can do, and that is you could be part of a lichen. So lichens are weird. They're not one thing. They're multiple things. Always has to have a fungal partner that provides the structure, the base, and it has to have something that can photosynthesize, algae or cyanobacteria. So obviously, the algae and cyanobacteria are creating food, sugar, and what the fungus is providing is a home and a shelter against desiccation or dehydration, and they can live. Now, what's interesting is that we've known about these for a while, but recent research has showed that there could be more than 2 partners. There could be 3, 4, or more partners. They're crazy. Lichen lives everywhere, even Antarctica, I believe. I mean, it's everywhere. They don't like poor air quality because lichen has the ability to get nutrients from dissolved in the air. So they're very sensitive to air quality. So a place where you're not going to find lichen, Logan Airport. You ever notice all that concrete and there's not a speck of lichen anywhere near Logan Airport? Not at all. But if you go a few miles further and you go to the graveyards in Boston, there's lichen on those tombstones. And there's lichen on, you see a concrete bench and there's lichen on it. So lichen is usually an indication of, the air quality is not too bad. But if there's no lichen at all on any of the rocks or concrete, the air is not that great. So I just posed these 3 pictures. These are not official categories. They're just the way, the shapes. So crustose is the stuff you can't even scrape off the stone or the bark. It's like glued on, right, like a tattoo. The foliose is the leaf-like stuff. We have, among our most common foliose lichen, you ever see in the woods the rock tripe that looks like someone glued leaves to the ledge or the boulders? That's actually lichen. And a fun thing to do is, especially if it's been dry for a while, and the surface of the lichen is like this ugly, like khaki gray-green, pour water on it and you'll get a brighter, fresher green color. It'll come back to life again, and you'll see that green. So that's an example of foliose, and those are the most common that we see. But there are also fruticose are ones that branch, little branches. But this is really magnified. They're really tiny, and the ones with little red caps have the nickname British soldiers. And they're really cute. They're fun to find, and I find them in disturbed soil. Is that where you find them, or?
They are growing on the top of my garage.
On top of your garage. Is your top of your garage exposed to direct sunlight or sheltered shadowed by a tree or something?
Mostly shadowed by a tree.
Mostly shadow. And you're getting these British soldiers on, wow, because I've seen moss and some lichens. I haven't seen these on a roof before. That's really fascinating. Oh, okay, great. So I see these often under power lines. The easements under power lines, like disturbed soil, you can often find them there. These are specific mushrooms that are available right now. They're coming out. The season's a little early yet. Even though it's June, it's still a little early. You're not seeing a lot, but here are some things that are coming out. Ganoderma sugae, another popular medicinal known as the mushroom of life in Asia, nicknamed reishi. We do have it here. Sugae means hemlock, so you'll only find this on hemlock. And the season is basically passing right now. So if you're interested in the medicinally, you want the young stuff. The young stuff is like the stuff just emerging. It's got the white, or it's the edges here. So you'll notice it's white, it gets orange colors, and then as it grows and the season ages, they'll turn that burgundy purple color and now that varnish or shellac quality on the top. People make tinctures that are alleged to have medicinal qualities from this. If you're interested in this, you want to go to a place with lots of hemlock groves. Fortunately, hemlock groves are the best place to be when it gets hot because they're usually cooler than everything around it because it's so shady. But their peak season actually just passed, so mid to late May for this. Right now we got these two. So this is one of the first cap and stem mushrooms that'll appear in our woods. It's Hapanella atratomentosa. It's got, when they're young, they got a strange ratio of cap to stem where the caps are really small in relation to the stem. Eventually these will get much bigger. But in this stage, I like to think of them as French workmen. It looks like they have berets and leather aprons on, doesn't it? And then you'll also notice the gills run underneath the cap and actually onto the stipe. And that's a quality, it's called decurrent. So yet another one of those identifying characteristics. What do the gills do? Do they reach the stipe? Are they free from the stipe? Do they go down the stipe, the decurrent? These are different qualities it can have. This is another dyeing mushroom, DYE mushroom that people use. It's not edible, give you an upset stomach. This is one of the first edibles that comes out, the Swilla spraguei. It's grouped with the boletes because it's a cap and stem mushroom with tubes and pores. So you can see the tubes, the pores here on this yellow surface. Notice yet another kind of partial veil, very membranous. In fact, it's still attached to the membrane. The thread of it is still connected from the membrane to the stipe. These are edible, but unfortunately, the bugs tend to get there before we do. You'll cut it open, you'll find lots of larval tunnels. They're associated with eastern white pine, which is one of our most common trees in Massachusetts. So that's another way of saying these are all over the place. So yeah, eastern white pines, take a look. These should start coming up in a couple of weeks. Two of the earliest cap and stem mushrooms. And guess what? I found these 2 days ago. But I want to describe these two mushrooms here. So on the left, we have Megacalibia rodmanii, and it's known as the platyful because sometimes the caps can get that big. They can get really large. The cap surface is thin. It's called the pileus, and I don't know if this is related, but it can peel off, but it's spelled different, Pileus. Early on, when they're younger, it just tends to break into little lenticels, the cap, and then it actually splits. The gills are really deep. It's called broad. They're really deep, long gills. And people can say this is an edible, but to me, this is like spinach. You get 55 gallons of this, cook it down, and you get 2 tablespoons worth of food. So I don't think it's worth bothering with. Another mushroom is coming out in either now or in a couple of weeks, Pluteus cervinus. Both of these grow on wood. This tends to be, the Megacalibia tends to be more gray. The deer mushroom tends to have more fawn or brownish colors. And when you flip it over, you'll recognize that the stem the gills don't quite meet the stem. You see this free space here? So that's another characteristic. So the gills are free. They don't quite meet the stem. The other thing is, you can see the gills are white, but this produces pink spores, and you can see the pink spores are beginning to color the gills over here. You can see some where it's trapped in there. This is also an edible, but it's not a great edible. It's one I don't even bother with. So my question is, I'm passing these mushrooms around. Which mushroom do you think it could be? Do you think it's the Megacalibia rodmanii with the broad gills, or is it the Pluteus cervinus that has some pink coloration in there, and the gills are a little more shallow? Which one do you think it is? The platter? The platter? Yep, you guys are right. That is the platyful. That is the platyful. Yes, indeed. That's exactly what this is here. By the way, I don't think I ever identified this. When I showed you this at the beginning of the program, this is Stropharia rugoso annulata, known as the wine cap. It is edible, and people are finding these in their mulch piles. So believe it or not, look in your mulch piles. You may have food. So these are edible. I tried them a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to give you my honest assessment. I sliced it, used it on pizza. It tasted similar to the button mushroom you get in the store, but much earthier. It felt like I was tasting dirt. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like chaga has an earthy flavor, and it's pleasant. So it's the kind of thing where I say, yes, it's edible. Think carefully about kind of recipe. Like this I would do with robust, on the rugoso annulata with like pork or something. Mushrooms decay very quickly after you pick them. These are just 3 other mushrooms that come out early. What color are the spores? If we look inside the gills, what color? Pink, thank you. So this is another pink. So Pluteus and Entelomas both produce pink spores. Pluteus, the mushrooms tend to grow on wood. Entelomas more terrestrial on the ground. This one's going to have lines on the stem. It's going to have pink pores. It's got a little papillate point at the cap. It's actually a pretty boring little brown mushroom, but I put it up here because you're going to see lots of them showing up soon, and they'll be here all season. Yes. So what she's referring to is there's a parasitic antheloma called Antheloma abortivum that attacks the honey mushroom. And when it does, it makes a mushroom, a weird-shaped mushroom that looks like a pale or albino Cheez-It. No, not Cheez-It, Cheeto. It's got a Cheeto shape. Some people call them a shrimp shape. They call them shrimpies. And these will come out late summer, fall. I didn't like them. I thought they were mushy, but some people like them. So Antheloma strictius, this is the pheasant back. It's beautiful. It's a polypore. It's also decurrent. You can see the pores coming down the stem here. Beautiful coloration. If it's soft, it's edible. You can eat the soft stuff. The chewy, leathery stuff, you just want to cut aside. I've never tried it, but I've heard it's pretty good. This is neither edible, nor medicinal, nor magic, or anything. It's just a pretty mushroom that grows in water. Most mushrooms don't grow in water. They need water, like we need water. But we can't survive underwater for the same reason the fungus can't. We need to exchange gases. So this has some kind of special something or other. Just as there's social plants that have evolved to be able to survive drowned roots, this guy has been able to survive with drowned mycelium. And they're small little mushrooms in bogs, fens, swamps, still water, sometimes even just large old puddles, and they got these yellow caps, just really beautiful little neon guys, and they're just fun to see. I just like seeing them because it means summer's coming. Agrocybia precox I put up here because it's a mushroom that's out now, and you can find it both in the woods and in lawns, and there's not much to say about it. It's what they call an LBM, a little brown mushroom, and just notice that as mushrooms age, you see this darkening here. So this is just a great lesson in common mushroom, and this is what they look like when they get older. They can develop this crusty brown colors, just like people do. So I'm going to start with you. So I found, if you look at the picture up there, the upper left-hand corner, there's my walking stick. I found this log 2 weeks ago, and I think it's sugar maple, and I took this chunk with me. I was attracted to it because of these little white dots, and those little white dots suggested to me this could be fungus. And boy, when I looked, not only is it fungus, but it's a special fungus. And I want to show you, if you look here, this is the largest one. This is the largest one. And you can see a couple of the younger ones are gray, and these are little tiny babies. So this is known as dead man's fingers. And two of the pictures are mine. So this is the log I got it from, and this is a close-up I did, a macro lens of what's available on that piece of wood. This I stole from the internet. And as they grow, this will get darker. Notice the white color? So they tend to look like fingernails on the darker, right? And then ultimately they get about the size of small fingers, and then they turn black, and it's creepy as heck. So you see this on really, really well-decayed wood. Now this is another thing about decay. Waves of different species. So next time you take down a tree in your yard, or if you see in your neighborhood a tree that's just recently cut down a stump, watch the stump over time. Different species of mushrooms will appear. Each in turn can digest what it can, then dies. So you have the pioneer comes, it eats what it can, dies out, and then there's something that comes next that can eat what's left over, etc., etc., etc. So you'll see waves of different species. These guys that show up at the very end. These are really well decayed, and I just thought it was pretty and worth showing to you because I was just thrilled to find it. And on iNaturalist, and this is something that's really kind of cool that happens. I follow some people who are really good mycologists. And one of the neat things is, if I find an unusual mushroom, guaranteed a day or two later, I'll go on iNaturalist and someone else I know will say, hey, I just found the xylem. I'm like, they're all coming up around the same time. This is the president of the Boston Mycological Club, enjoying his find of edibles. So let's talk about some edibles. We're going to start with the oysters, one of the most popular edibles, a decomposer. The classic, the one you get in the store, when they say oyster mushrooms, is the guy on the left. This is what they're selling you. The Pleurotus ostreatus is the classic. Notice it's sessile, that it grows on the side. It's got a lateral stem because of that side stem, and it fans out. And it's robust. It's brown and robust. Now, this is similar to Pleurotia belliporigens. All three are edible. Notice you can see some light here. There's some translucency. So these are thin. These are thick and robust. The Pleurotus ostreatus is a cool weather mushroom. This will fruit through the fall and winter. It's the other mushroom I see with snow on top sometimes. And in fact, in the winter, you know those warm spells we occasionally get? Sometimes you get a warm 3 or 4 days in January, February. During those warm spells, hit the sugar maples. Often you'll find these sugar maples on farm roads. A lot of farmers like to put these as barrier trees along the roads. You'll see these old sugar maples. If you go at the right times in the cool weather months, you might just find some beautiful batches of the Ostriatus, the Pleurotus, the oyster. These are warmer weather, so summer and then in the warm part of fall, the Pleurotus pulmonarius. Notice how this one is more floral and thin. Again, edible, warm month, edible, warm month. Now, there's been some controversy about the Pleurotrabella porogens because a number of people got sick in Japan in the early 2000s. But when you do your homework and you read into that poisoning, every single person who got sick was over 70 and on dialysis. So obviously toxicity varies if you have certain vulnerabilities that can come with age, but also can come with certain illnesses, cancer, etc. Just take that into that mix of what makes things toxic. Morels, this will probably be the last time I show this slide this year because morel season basically was the middle 2 weeks of May. Sorry to do that to you. But what's today, the 7th of June? All right, but I have this here just in case you happen to see one. I got to be honest with you. See this guy here? You know why he's smiling? Because he's probably the only person in this Massachusetts tour that found a morel. They're not common in Massachusetts. They're not common in New England. Mostly because of our soil. Morels like alkaline sweet soils. What's our dominant rock here? Granite. We got to take it for granted. We have granite. Our soils tend to lean a little acidic. That's why we have so many blueberry trees, right? Leans acidic. Most fungus likes a little acidic. That's good. This is a good fungal environment. Morels aren't one of them. They like alkaline soils. Where do you find them? Limestone. If you want interested in them, yes, I did find one. You can find them. Bolton, there's an abandoned limestone quarry in Bolton with a limestone kiln. Do you know where? Yes. Now think about it. Where's Bolton? Central Mass. What's that area of Central Mass called? Apple Valley. Apple Valley. That lime was probably quarried to spread on the ground the apple orchards because I think apples like a little more alkaline soil. So morels can associate with apple trees. So in New England, the controversy is, what about these old abandoned orchards, apple orchards? Should you eat those morels? Why wouldn't you? Well, because before DDT, there was arsenic was used. Arsenic sulfate, I forget the chemical name, but some variety of arsenic. Arsenic never goes away. It's a heavy metal. It stays in the soil, and the mushrooms bring it up. I met the author of the scientific paper on the toxicity of apple orchard morels in New England. Only one person is known to have died of arsenic poisoning from eating these morels.
How many did you?
That's the point. This guy ate pounds of morels every week for years. Pounds every week for years. Are any of us going to eat pounds of morels every week? No. So take that in mind. If I found a morel in an old apple orchard, would I eat it? The answer is I would, yes. I'd take that chance that I'd have a minute amount of arsenic in my system.
You already do.
I probably already have. And this will just add a little bit more. So the thing about morels, we just heard someone say, it doesn't look like anything else. However, there is a mushroom called a category, a genus called Gyromitra. And I want to talk about the difference between these two. It's important. This Gyromitra has a toxin that's found in jet fuel. Okay? Some people say, well, then they just boil them. Great. Then you turn the jet fuel into a gas, and the gas fills your house, right? Don't do it. It's poisonous. Don't. I mean, don't mess. Notice the differences. The true morel has these chambers. This has folds. The Gyromitra has folds. The true morel, the edges look like they've been shaved, right? They've been shaved. It's flat. The false morel, they're rounded. They're rounded. If I were to cut these in half and expose the inside of their stems, the true morel, their stalk will always be hollow, absolutely hollow. On the false morel, it'll be stuffed. There'll be all this thready tissue on the inside. So again, true morels, chambers versus folds, Sharp edges versus rounded. Hollow stem versus a stuffed stem. Gyromitra, true morel. Let's talk chanterelles. This is the first big, exciting edible that shows up in New England early summer. They'll start appearing. They love hardwoods. They love oak trees. Old cemeteries are not a bad place to go looking around the edges. And I also recommend another great place to look. Every cemetery graveyard has a waste space where they dump all the old wreaths and stuff. For some reason, that place is good for mushrooms, and I don't understand why, but you can often find good stuff there. Now, I have 4 pictures here. 2 of them hold chanterelles and 2 don't. Let's see how you do. Is this a real chanterelle? Upper left? No. So I heard a vote for no. How about this one on the right, upper right? True chanterelle? Yes. Okay. How about this guy here, lower left? Yes? Any chanterelles in this picture? Yes. Okay, I'm going to hate to break it to you. Okay, give me your sticker back. Yeah. This is a true morel. Chanterelle. Notice its wavy character. This is a false, a Hygrophorapis aurantiaca. There are true chanterelles here, plus black trumpets, plus lobster mushrooms, plus a different kind of chanterelle in the back here, ignicolor or something of tubies. This is just one collection. We found this over a few acres. We were goofing around. This is not a chanterelle at all. Notice that it's joined at the base. It's called cespitose, where they come off at the base. Remember that picture of the ectomycorrhizal symbiosis? There was a string of the yellow mushrooms. They're separate from each other, each one sitting hyphae down. These share a base. This is known as the jack-o'-lantern. Notice it's more robust, thicker, and it's orange. Not yellow, it's orange, and they're attached to the base. Don't eat those. They're toxic. They'll make you sick. Won't kill you. Just give you a really rough night. What you do with these, if you find a jack-o'-lantern, put it in a paper bag, find a closet, get in the closet, let your eyes adjust to the dark, then open the bag. If you're lucky, you'll get a green glow, a little bit of bioluminescence. That's what these are good for, that bioluminescence. Let's go more deeply. So how did I know? Remember that first mystery? How did I know that guy did not have a chanterelle? First, the season. Mid-September. Nuh-uh. Chanterelles are in early summer. I swear, they fade out somewhere in middle to late August. They're gone, right? September, chanterelles, not impossible, but unlikely. But the killer was, he said, I found it on a log. Chanterelles are ectomycorrhizal symbionts. They'll be found on the ground, associated with a tree root. The Hygrophorapis aurantiaca, that's this boy here, that's this guy, grows on wood. So let's talk about this. So one of the first distinctions, 2 of them already. Season, early summer versus late summer, fall. Substrate, terrestrial ectomycorrhizal symbiotic versus on wood, it's a decomposer. Let's look at some other differences. If we were to break one of these open, the false chanterelle is hollow and dark. The true chanterelle is solid. By the way, don't have to cut them. They're like string cheese. You can just pull them apart. It'll either be pure white or just a touch of faint yellow, just a touch. Finally, the 5th distinction is the gills. And this is going to drive you absolutely nuts. The true chanterelle has false gills. The false chanterelle has true gills. Let me explain. True gills are sharp blades. Like imagine I'm a gill. I got a flat surface here, not really, but a flat surface here, and an edge, like an edge, right? Notice here, though. Notice these are hardly relieved, hardly over. They're so shallow above the flesh, right? They're just barely coming out, and they're rounded. They're not sharp. Shallow, rounded, not sharp. If I ran my thumb over it, it wouldn't break. Whereas if I ran my thumb over these gills, they're going to break apart into pieces, right? So let me go over it. Season. Let's go over the comparison. Early summer versus late summer, fall. Substrate, ground versus logs. Lifestyle, ectomycorrhizal symbiotic versus decomposer. Solid white flesh versus hollow and dark. And finally, the gills. True chanterelle, false gills, shallow and rounded versus the sharp gills. Notice too, on the top, the shape, Hygrophorus orientica almost always has that perfectly round. These will be wavy, kind of tulip-like often. Popular edible. Chicken of the woods actually is multiple species. So here are the two most common. The Laetiporus sulphureus and the Laetiporus cincinnatus. Both are edible. Both are common. Notice how different they look. The Laetiporus sulphureus will be orange on top, yellow, and I mean yellow, even brighter than this man's shirt. I mean yellow, yellow, yellow on the bottom. And they grow shelf-like, layers like pancakes stacked. These, the Laetiporus cincinnatus, will be pink on the top, white on the bottom, and they have a basal rosette shape. And they'll be on the ground, either on the side of a stump, or they may be growing from a decaying root you can't see on the ground. Both of them are good edibles. They're thick and robust. So if you were to cook these, you cook them longer than you would ordinary mushrooms. A lot of people, they're called chicken in the woods, and it's a cliche. Yes, they do taste a little bit like chicken, but you can cook them like chicken nuggets. Why not egg them, bread them, and then air fry, do what you would do when you make a chicken nugget. You can do it with this. Advice. If you see like gray or olive-colored tissue discoloration, don't eat that. Cut that away. That's bacteria growth. Cut it away or move on to a better mushroom. Another thing I just want to say, if you were to come across something like this, would you take all of it? No. Scout's honor? Okay. Yeah, just good mojo, right? Good mojo is you always leave something behind. Never take everything. That's really bad. The mushroom spirits will come after you, and you don't want that to happen. You really don't. Quickly, I had a friend pointed out, someone says, you know what, I don't pick trail, like there's certain places where I will not eat the chanterelles. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, like I found a place that was near a fishing spot. And the person says, I'm not going to eat those. And I go, why? Well, because fishermen probably relieve themselves, right? Or they're by there, right? You see spots that look, okay, I'll go a different spot for the chanterelles. What do you need on? Fortunately, one of the things I love about this hobby is that the most expensive things are the gasoline in your car and the books. The books are expensive. I'm not going to lie. The books are really ridiculous. They're expensive books. But everything else is cheap. You want a basket. The reason you want a basket as opposed to a bag is you want the horizontal versus the vertical. You don't want to stack the mushrooms on top of each other if you can avoid it. You want them spread out so they don't crush each other. Simple. Sometimes you want to put the different ones in different bags. I want to assure you, suppose you had the Amanita bisporigera, the deadly destroying angel, in one side of your bag and chanterelles in the other. Is that dangerous to have the toxics with the... No. The spores and the toxics will not infect the other ones. In fact, no. They can rub against each other, no problem. The danger is only if you mistake one for the other and eat it. That's the danger, is you. The danger is not the mushrooms. But you often want to take the mushrooms, you want to put them in bags or wrap them in wax paper. If you like bags, use paper bags. Never use plastic bags. You don't want them to sweat. You want a knife and also something to get the base. Remember the amanitas? All three of the different amanitas I showed had different bases. So if I were to identify them, I picked it, didn't know what it was, that's part of the information I want. So if you're picking to identify it later, you got to get up underneath the mushroom and pick it out. I use my fingers. Or if it's a big, robust mushroom, I use a weed puller you get from the hardware store for $10, whatever it is. You know what it looks like, just a stick with a handle, right? The reason you want all that information. However, if I see a chanterelle, I know what a chanterelle looks like by now. I'm confident. I know what a chanterelle is. I know I'm going to eat that. That's not for identification. That's for my stomach. I'm going to cut that. And the reason is I don't want to have to clean all the dirt out later. I don't want to get the dirt in the gills and have to spend all that time cleaning. Another thing I want to say about cleaning. Yes, you can wash them with water. Don't worry about that. That's nonsense, but you can't get them wet. Yes, they'll absorb a little bit of water, but that's not the issue. The issue is the water that made them. So you can wash them. In fact, with black trumpets, if I go after black trumpets after there's been a rainstorm, the rain will often bump up the dirt underneath them and they'll be like a mess. I wash those bad boys. Then you dry them, spread against paper. If you have a dehydrator, you load them in the dehydrator. If you don't have a dehydrator, just spread them in the paper, take a fan, set the fan on low, have the air blow across the mushrooms. Overnight, they'll dry. You want them like potato chip dry, crispy dry. Okay. You want insect protection for yourself. anything you need for your comfort. But I learned something recently that's important about the phone is your best friend because it has a camera. Take pictures before you pluck. Picture before pluck. Because, one, the colors can fade. That'll freak you out later, right? So you retain the color, retain the shape, pure. But it has information. Was it growing on needles? Was it growing on, on the side of a tree? Was it growing on a dead log? Was it growing on leaves? What tree was it associated with? The picture can have information that'll help you later. Further, and this is because I'm old, and all the young people know this already, but when you take a picture, there's an opportunity for a caption. If you hit the little I with the circle, it means information, the keyboard appears and you can type in the notes, like found by an oak tree. Even better, when the caption comes up, there's a little icon for a microphone. Your phone becomes a dictaphone. Now you can dictate your notes into the caption. There's no excuse. And the geolocation is under information as well, which is handy if you forget, where did I find this? That's all there. So that's good stuff to bring with you.
How do you get the bugs out?
You can't. So if there are bugs in them, you just give up the ghost. Now what I do is, if you mean it's inside the mushroom, that mushroom I throw away. But if you take something like hen of the woods in the fall, and that's a grayish mushroom with lots of rosettes that appears at the base of oak stumps. It's a medicinal that's also an edible. Many people love it, maitake. The hardest part is cleaning the damn thing. What I do is I fill up my sink with water, cold or cool water, and put a little salt in there. Shake it around, and then it's the salt water I'm trying to get the bug, any of the bugs to come out. In that, I'm not going to tell you it's great. It sort of works, but not perfect. That's how I get the bugs out.
You say hen of the woods, and the other one was chicken of the woods.
Yeah, 2 different mushrooms. They're not related. They're both polypores. Chicken of the woods have bright colors, and comes in the summer. Hen of the woods, I didn't picture it because it won't be around till late September, August, October. They're also a rose. What the hell? What am I doing? I'm an idiot. I have a book. I mean, this is why I bring these books. All right, I'll show it to you so you can see it. It's called Grifola frondosa. And I'll pass this around so everyone can see it. So I'm going to take a tab. So it'll be the purple tab. And I'll put that on there in case it gets lost or folded. This is the Grifola frondosa. You can see it's got these shelves. I'm sorry, I know it's hard, but I'll pass the book around. And if you would pass that around for people. So that's the Grifola frondosa. It appears in the fall at the base of hardwoods, typically oaks. Pinch it. If it doesn't turn black, that's good. If it turns black where you pinch it, it's a different species of mushroom. It's not toxic. Myripolis substanea, it's called the black staining polypore. It looks awfully like that. So if you pinch and it turns black, don't eat that. I've made this mistake. It just turns into shoe leather. It's just too tough to eat, that's why. But the real one is less tough and you can eat. All right, so I went on a digression.
Is that an age thing or no?
It's partly age. So some people will eat the black staining polypore when it's super young, but most people won't bother. It's not that great. But if you accidentally cook it instead of the Grifola frondosa, the maitake, it won't kill you. It'd just be like, it'd be like chewing a saddle. Yeah. When you get mushroom guides, they have something called a key, and there's different systems for keys, but the key is a process of elimination. Typically a series of questions. Does it have such and such a quality? If yes, go to some place. If no, go to the different place. And you just keep going till you cut down to your thing, your species. However, the first cut is often, the first question they ask you, well, what's the spore color? So that means likely you're going to need a spore print. And a spore print it looks like like this, or like this. And what happens is, and what you do to make a spore print, you take your cap and stem mushroom. So let's take, where was the guy? Like this guy, I'm going to do a demonstration because he's already lost. So one of the things you do, you take the stem off, you turn the fertile surface face down, and you put a cap over it. Obviously, I'd use something bigger with a bigger mushroom. The reason you put the cap on it is because you don't want the wind currents to blow the spores around. The spores are really light. Even when you think it's still air, it's moving. So you do this for 4 hours to overnight. You take this off. You take off the mushroom. Oh, there's a little larva. And you should get an echo, a pattern that echoes the pattern of the fertile surface above it. And they can be quite beautiful. Let it dry. I like to use index cards because they're more robust than paper. Let it dry, then hit it with hairspray. Hairspray is the same stuff as artist fixative, but it's like a fifth of the cost and there's a little perfume on, but it will keep the spores from rubbing off.
So the force of the spray doesn't scatter them at all?
No, just a little light. I go to a window and I do it because it stinks. Okay, and you do that, and that gives you the spore color, which is an important, useful diagnostic tool. Also, some people just enjoy them because they're pretty. It's like a little art project, and it's fun to do yourself or with kids, etc., etc. How to cheat? Well, if you're like me, I don't want to wait 4 hours to overnight to start identifying my mushrooms. So I look for ways, how can I know what the spore print color is without doing a spore print? So remember we looked inside the gills of the Pluteus and then the Entoloma and we saw the pink? So that's one thing, like look what's going on here. So this is the Cortinarius iodes. There was an iodes above this that just said, drop this deposit on this guy underneath it. So sometimes just look under. This happened here. This is the Hypholoma lateridium, the bricktop. And look, it left this deposit of black spores here. Also, if I look inside the gills, I could see the coloration. Again, with the Cortinarius iodes, look at all the striated tissue. That's the collapsed cortina over here. And look at the color. It's that brick red or blood red color. They're dried blood, and that's the color of the spores. Or if we go here, I turned this mushroom, lifted it from the duff, and you can see the white spores on the leaf underneath, and you can even see a pattern of the gills over here. Same thing here. This is an Entoloma or Pluteus. It's got pink spores. The one on top dropped on the one below, and you'd have to look very carefully, but inside you can even see a little bit of a gill pattern in there. Finally, I just want to point out, this is called Laccaria ochra purpurea. That'll come out later summer. Beautiful purple gills, but notice this white stuff. Those are the spores. So sometimes you can cheat by looking under the mushroom to see, did it deposit something? Take a picture. Or the mushroom itself, look inside the gills. You can sometimes see the discoloration of the gills from the spores themselves. Question time. I'm going to do the second question first. When is the season here? So the season, yes, there are some mushrooms now, but the truth is our season doesn't really begin to the second week of July through the first week of November. Different mushrooms will appear at different times. There'll be early summer, midsummer, late summer, early fall, early winter. There'll be some mushrooms will be continuous, but the others will trade out species. And you'll see a whole nother set of mushrooms in the fall than what you commonly find in the summer. I go out the first week of July, and I'm always brokenhearted. It's the second week. There's just no way around it. That's just the way it is. Is there an easy way to know if a mushroom is poisonous? No. You have to do the identification work. What's that? Not necessarily. I mean, mostly yes, but I often wonder when they have something called forest medley. Who picked those? I don't know. So there is no way to know. You got to know the characteristics. There's no magic trick. There's like an old wives' tale. You take the mushrooms and boil them, and if you put a silver spoon in there, if the silver spoon turns black, it's toxic. No, it's all BS. There are no shortcuts. No, that leads us to the issue of edibility and eating mushrooms. So the first thing is to eat mushrooms safely, you have to be 100% certain of the identification. That means you have to know the identifying characteristics of the mushroom you want, plus the identifying characteristics of the lookalikes you don't want. Notice how much time we spent with the true morel and the false morel. Chambers versus folds, sharp edges versus rounded edges, hollow stem versus stuffed, or the chanterelle, false gills versus true gills, white solid inside the stem versus hollow, etc., etc. You have to know those characteristics, the ones you want and the characteristics of the lookalikes that you want to avoid. That means for many of us, if you're just starting as a beginner, perhaps the first edible should be the easiest mushrooms you can't mistake. Chicken of the woods is a good beginner's mushroom, right? It's hard to mistake the identification. Black trumpets, good beginner mushroom. Giant puffballs, good beginner mushroom, not found in forests. Those are going to be found in parks, lawns, etc. The only hint I want to give you there is when you slice a giant puffball, you want it white inside. You don't want it, you don't want it brown or turning yellow. That's sporulating. You want it pure white. So you have to know what it is. But even if, at that point, next thing is you're going to cook them thoroughly. I know there are restaurants that have salad bars where they serve sliced button mushrooms. Don't eat those because I have and I've survived, but I'm not going to do that anymore. Mushrooms can have a lot of bacteria. It's a happy home for bacteria. I don't want to compete with the bacteria. If they want it, it's yours. I'm not going to mess with you. Go for it. Cook them. Next, young and fresh. See this nasty mushroom? I swear, I've been on talks. I'll hold up a nasty mushroom like this. It's falling apart. There'll be flies buzzing around it. Inevitably, someone in the back will say, hey, is that mushroom edible? And I say, if you saw this in a store, would you buy that? I mean, use that same logic. Yes, you want them young and fresh, just like anything else you would eat. If the mushroom is new to you, that is, it's a type you haven't tried before, you take a few bites. After you cook it, you take a few bites, wait 10 minutes. Feel good? Have a few more, but don't have a pig out. Have a modest meal. If you can get through the night, okay. When you wake up in the morning, if you wake up, you know that mushroom was good for you. That's an edible that works. If you don't wake up, that's the last you'll ever have of that mushroom, right? But basically, when I merely mean, that's a joke, but if you feel fine, you know that you've passed the test. That means that mushroom's good for you, and you can move on and continue with that mushroom in perpetuity. But that's the process. I go through this. First time chicken woods, a little bit of chicken woods. First time black trumpet, a little bit of black trumpet, et cetera, et cetera. A little bit first, then I go, oh, okay, I can have that. Because even if it's so-called edibles, just like there's certain nuts or Brussels sprouts or seafood that are edible that some people can't eat. Right? They have allergens, it's just different compatibilities. What's the best way to learn? I highly advise joining a club. I think the fees are about $20 a year. You get the newsletter. You get the live events. You get the webinars that you can participate in Zoom. But the most important thing you get is the calendar of walks in the summer and fall. That's where the value is. And when you go on these, that's the best way to learn, is to go on these forays with the club. They'll always have at least one or two experts there to do the table talk at the end and talk about identifying, usually, and also for the walk leaders. But even the people who aren't the leaders will be knowledgeable. The other people in the club will help you. People are friendly. They want to help you, right? They want to be involved. So we're here in Lancaster, so obviously I recommend the Boston Mycological Association. I belong to both clubs, and the PVMA is out west. I'm in the center. We're in the center, which means that both are equally inconvenient to us, many of the locations. But you look at, some, you can say, no, I'm not driving out to Essex. But they'll have other ones that are closer here. So sure, I'll go to Concord or whatever. Yeah, that's close enough, right? Make your own judgment, but I highly recommend. Now, on the web, the Pioneer Valley has a website with an education section I highly recommend. Outstanding. Even includes recipes. That's how exhaustive it is. Mushroomexpert.com I like a lot, but it doesn't give information on edibility or toxicity. So that becomes a two-step process. You can use that Mushroom Expert to identify your mushroom, but then Google the name and learn, from Wikipedia, whatever, if it's edible or toxic. Myco Quebec is in French, but it has more photographs per species than any other website I know. It's outstanding. And I just want to throw a shout out to Learn Your Land on YouTube. Anyone familiar with Learn Your Land? Adam Harrington? He is wonderful, and I love him because he's personable, he's a great speaker, easy to listen to, easy to watch. 80% of his stuff is about mushrooms, but he also talks about forest ecology. He's in Western Pennsylvania. So most of his stuff overlaps with us. It's not far enough, most of it does, but occasionally he'll have stuff that we don't have and vice versa. But the big thing I love about him is that he also does research and he references peer-reviewed scientific literature. He does his homework, which means I trust him. There are other people on YouTube talking about mushrooms, and I don't know who they are, where they come from, what's their bona fides. I don't know. And I've seen some weird, wacky stuff on YouTube. People saying, oh yeah, if it's got this, pick those. If it turns blue, yeah. Be careful out there. All right. Books. So here's what I would say. If your interest is casual, I like this little guy. Now, unfortunately, there are 4 books that have the words mushrooms and northeast in the title. So the way to remember, if you're interested, this is authored by Marone and Sturgeon, the little guy, Marone and Sturgeon. I like this because 90 to 95% of the mushrooms I find are in here. And I also like the way it's organized. It has icons to say what type of mushroom, season, and substrate, plus the tells, the distinguishing characteristics he puts in bold green. Isn't that nice? Very thoughtful, a lot of good stuff. If you want to go deeper, I like this one, the Baroni book. So this is Timothy Baroni, Mushrooms in the Northeast, Timothy Baroni. And if you just look, I mean, he's just got so much more information per mushroom. This is my daily read. This is my regular. I also brought here a third one. This won't interest most of you, but the reason I brought this is this. If you look at the other books, you'll see the mushroom. Look how beautiful that mushroom picture is. Isn't that gorgeous? That's lovely, right? It's on site, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Then you look in here. Everyone see this? The pictures aren't that beautiful. But you know what? This is what your mushrooms look like when you get home. That's why I like this book. Because my mushrooms often will not look as beautiful as they do in these books, but they can look like what's here, and that can be very, very helpful. I think the third book is out of print. You'd have to go to Abe Books or Amazon. The other 2 are very much in print. The Complete Mushroom Hunter by the same Gary Linkoff I told the story about before. This is another book that he wrote, is also wonderful. If you want to get deep and you want to do the Bible of mushroom books, Mushrooms Demystified by David O'Rourke, it's a big door stopper of a book, and it's wonderful. And with that is the formal end of the program. I went to the full 2 hours. Can you believe it? And you guys hung on. So thank you. You've been terrific. You're free to leave. You're free to go. But if you have questions, I will take questions. And I'd be happy to do my best to answer them. But before you go, I just want to say thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. I appreciate you giving me your Saturday. Thank you.